Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be talking about the Commonwealth of Virginia. We'll be looking at the state's upcoming gubernatorial election. We've got just under 3 weeks to go till Election Day, really close to 2 weeks, actually. I think we have 17 days now, and it's shaping up to be a doozy, obviously, with regards to the number of just purely shocking things that have happened in Virginia. Maybe not as much in the governor's race as the attorney general race, which has been absolutely chaotic since we had the scandal from Jay Jones. I made a whole video about that a couple days ago. Go check it out. I summarized what happened and I tell you what it means for the race. But nonetheless, today we're going to look at some early vote data and talk about it mostly as it pertains to the gubernatorial race. Obviously, the race for governor right now does seem to be leaning towards Democrat Abigail Spanberger over Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears, but a lot of Republicans have been claiming some momentum out of these early vote, early returns, I guess you could say, at this point. So a couple things to consider as we think about Virginia and what the early vote data is that we can't draw sweeping conclusions at this point. It is October 17th. There are well over 2 weeks to go to Election Day. That means there's a lot of voting to be done. And obviously there is, Election Day, where it's likely that we're going to have a ton of votes cast as well, and that's going to decide the margins as well as the victors in these races. So we don't know what the electorate's going to look like, because if you look at the total ballots returned and you look at the statewide total, it's around 600,000, a little less. And if you go to 2021, last year there was a gubernatorial election in Virginia, turnout was over 3 million. So conservatively, 600,000 out of 3 million is around a fifth, probably less than that, because this is a little less than 600,000, and this is a little more than 3 million. So at best, we're at a sixth of the vote. We're probably close to a seventh of the total vote, and that's just assuming turnout stays the same. It's possible turnout is higher than 2021. I think it'll probably be a similar margin. So that's the first thing you have to consider, which is that in general, the problem with early vote data at this point is that we just don't have a ton of votes. One out of every 7 Virginians probably, roughly, has cast a ballot. That is not necessarily hugely indicative. And then the other thing we have to consider is that the trends we're seeing right now just across the counties, whether they be red or blue, are often not necessarily relevant statewide. For example, if you look at, say, let's just go here, Buchanan County. Not a lot of votes to be had here. It's a pretty rural county. Obviously, Trump won it in 2024 by 70%. More than that, Winsome Earl Sears is going to win it in November by a good amount too. And we can see crazy increase or decreases because there's not a lot of people, right? We can see a 30% drop off in early turnout if just a few people don't vote compared to last year, right? Because the county's small. So we're going to get bigger swings in either direction, smaller populations than we would in, say, Loudoun County, where we have a lot of votes, or Fairfax County, where we have a lot of votes, or the city of Charlottesville, where not as much as Loudoun or Fairfax, but certainly a good number of votes to be had there compared to like a rural county where there's only a couple hundred or a couple thousand, eligible voters. So that is the first thing we have to, another thing I should say we have to remember. Now, with that being said, there are some patterns that I'm seeing when I look at these maps. And again, this is on State Navigate. It's a free website, a ton of great data there to look at. So just looking at the 2024 margin, obviously, I just want to go through this quickly because I think we talked about this a lot, but Harris won the Virginia by 6 last year. She got about 52% of the vote. Trump got around 46% of the vote here. And that is a solid margin for Harris. It wasn't as much as Biden in 2020, who won it by 10%. But it was still, I would say, reasonably strong for Harris. It wasn't like super close the way that other states, like, for example, like New Hampshire were. New Hampshire was a lot closer than expected. It was a 2 or 3 point margin, I think. But Virginia, even though there are obviously like the majority of counties are Trump counties, the population, primarily in Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, Arlington County near D.C., deep blue areas, Charlottesville metro area, that's where the University of Virginia is, pretty blue as well. Richmond getting bluer. This is probably the, among the bluest trending parts of the country. A lot of population to be had there. And then in the Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area, there's also a lot of voters there. But of course, the issue with this for Democrats is that the margin they get out of these counties is often pretty slim compared to, say, Nova, Charlottesville, or Richmond. Again, Republicans do well in the exurbs of D.C., right, of Northern Virginia, I should say, up here, right, like especially Culpeper County is a big one. This is one that's been in competitive congressional races for the past few cycles. It's usually pretty big for Republicans. And then Trump did very well in Appalachian, Virginia, not really to my surprise last year. So that's what we're dealing with, though, is that it's a blue state. It's not deep blue the way neighboring Maryland is. It's not deep red the way, neighboring West Virginia is, of course, but it's a blue-leaning state. Now, if we look at the total early voting in 2025, unsurprisingly, what you'll see is that, the counties with the most people are turning in the most votes because there's more voters who are voting there. Okay, right? I just wanted to kind of point that out. When you look at this, map, don't be misled. But if we look overall at turnout versus 2024, we can kind of see a different story, which is that even in, the counties that are voting the most, like Fairfax County, which is the biggest county population-wise in Virginia, the turnout rate, relative to this point in 2024, it isn't as high as it might look if you were to only consult this kind of, I would say, like this infographic. And so what we can do now is we can look at the counties where we have a lot of data, or excuse me, where we have a lot of turnout, and we can see, for the most part, these are Republican counties. Now, I would say Democrats are not doing too well in the, and again, we have to remember, early voting leans Democratic overall, right? So in counties that are even, early voting there is probably more Democratic. In counties that are deep red, early voting there is going to be only light red. And in counties that are deep blue, early voting there is, even bluer, right? So Democrats probably want to get good margins out of the Virginia Beach area. They have, this is an area where Democrats do well in some parts. And then, of course, they do somewhat well in other parts. Like there's some counties here that are kind of 50-50, maybe narrowly Democratic. There's others that are deeper blue. But across the Virginia Beach area, the turnout's been pretty, middling. It hasn't been particularly high or low, I would say, but it's a little low. It's on the lower end, right? The average is around 69%. These counties are kind of in the low 60s, high 50s. So they're lagging behind the statewide total a little bit, which is concerning for Democrats just because at this point, right, you want to see higher turnout out of the competitive areas, right? So that's not exactly great for Spanberger. The other problem that she has is that, right, like if you go to Arlington, behind Virginia, the state as a whole by a decent amount. Alexandria is a little behind. Fairfax County is pretty solid for Democrats, which is definitely huge for them. Fairfax County is, of course, a bucket of Democratic votes every election cycle, so it being ahead of the state as a whole is quite good. But then Loudoun County, this is also really bad. This is a Harris +7 or +16 county from 2024. Biden won it by 25 in 2020. It's a typical county that you expect Democrats to do well in an off-year race. It's pretty affluent, pretty educated. It's historically left trending, or when I say historically, I mean like the past 10 to 15 years broadly, it's been left trending. It's below the statewide total, which is not a good sign for Democrats. Now, when I say not a good sign, I don't mean it's going to lose them the race. I don't think that anyone looking at early vote data 2 weeks out in a couple of counties trying to tell you that it's going to change the outlook of an entire race is not being honest with you. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying I don't think it's a good trend or a good individual thing in a vacuum for Abigail Spanberger. Now, on the contrary, for Winsome Earl Sears, there are a couple encouraging signs, right? We see kind of across the center of the state, not talking about Richmond yet, but kind of between Goochland and Powhatan County and up to Highland and Bath County. I did not know the names of either of these two counties before. I just full disclosure, I do not have every county in Virginia memorized. I just know geographically these are red counties, and you can, we can double check this by looking at 2024. These are red, deep red counties. This area kind of between here and here, Charlottesville is the only blue area, but the rest of these areas are quite red. Turnout is relatively high. It's above the state as a whole. It's in the 80s, 70s, which is quite good because Virginia is 69%, just below 70% state, Commonwealth-wide, I should say, really. So you have higher turnout in these counties. And of course, I did say that early voting leans a bit more Democratic, but that's just relative, right? So in a county that Trump won by 60 points, Democrats aren't winning the early vote. They're just losing it by less than they, lose the election day or overall vote even. So that's something to consider. So even in red counties, early voting is still probably benefiting the Republican candidate Winsome Earl Sears here. And when you look across this part of the state, it's pretty clear to me that this is a good sign for her. There is one curious county, which is Smith County, which is exceeding its 2024 turnout by 24%. I am not sure if this is an error. I looked it up. I couldn't find anything specifically on Smith County. I'm going to assume this might be an error, but either way, I'd imagine turnout there is pretty high. It's possible it's not an error. It's possible that there's just more early voting going on in this area specifically. But just assuming that this area is higher turnout in general, that's also good for Winsome Earl Sears because again, these are deep red counties down in the southern tip of the state. And then when you look at the other Democratic areas, I think Fairfax being higher is good for Democrats, but Spanberger not doing too well in Prince William County, that's a concern for her. Loudoun County, that's a bigger concern for her. And then Virginia Beach also isn't looking too good. I would say that Richmond is solid for Democrats right now. Chesterfield and Henrico County, as well as Richmond itself, are all in the mid 70s, which is above the statewide average. So that's a pretty good sign. These are blue areas. They're also left trending. I would expect Spanberger to really crush it in Richmond, especially if she is going to win by as much as people expect, which is a double-digit margin. TBD on that. I'll get back to you with my final prediction on probably November 2nd or 3rd. But overall, that's what we're kind of seeing right now. So the point of this video isn't really to like make a big conclusion or to like, present an argument that is in favor of a huge surge for Republicans or, to push a narrative that Democrats are going to landslide here. But I do think that it's important to point out there are a couple of things that are, happening without feeling the need to make a big, like, sweeping conclusion. I would say right now the returns just for early vote data relative to the state as a whole, when you look at these percentages, are probably a little better on balance for Winsome Earl Sears than they are for Abigail Spanberger. I don't think that is going to be indicative in even a week or 2 weeks. What we might be seeing right now is maybe a Republican surge because of the Jay Jones news. I think that is a possible explanation. It's also possible that Republicans, coming off a successful 2024, are really eager to get out the vote early. They didn't do it in 2020. They did it a lot in 2024. They were a lot more successful in 2024 in states where they really ramped up those early vote operations. So that's what I have for you today. I think it's an important thing to look at, and I'll probably check back by the end of around Halloween, maybe a couple days before when we get more early vote data in. Remember, we're probably only about a seventh in terms of total votes cast if we're looking at 2021 levels of turnout. So, hold your horses. Don't, jump to sweeping conclusions, and I will keep checking in. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. Thanks, and I'll see you all next time.